everybody, this is meteorologist Andrew Pinero in this lens action review series. This one is going to be the Canon RF35, this cute little compact lens. So this is a lens that I was like, oh, let me try it. It's actually the least expensive RF lens in the new Canon RF lineup. So that was interesting. I gave it a try and I think this is fantastic. One of the greatest things with this lens is the aperture. It's f1.8. Very wide open. I have taken some shots, astrophotography shots with this. And when I'm usually doing my weather update videos, this is the lens that I'm using. It is a great lens because of how wide open the aperture can get. And the focal length I enjoy. This is again 35 millimeter. Not everybody likes the 35 millimeter size, but I enjoy this. And with this camera, the only challenge is with the Canon EOS R is whenever we're shooting in 4K. 4K on this does have this 1.7-ish times crop in, almost 2 times the zoom just from going to 4K. So this is a great lens for whenever I'm doing anything with video. Also, this is a macro lens, macro photography, and I have done a lot of product shots where I would shoot for selling. So that's a great lens for that. So let's now head to the studio and we're gonna talk a little bit about some test shots from this RF 35 millimeter, both during the day and some night astrophotography. Well, in the studio now, so we're going to take a look at some pictures, but overall, the Canon RF35, this is the lens I'm using right now. Just because this lens is like set for this studio, or I kind of set the studio for this lens. So unfortunately, I couldn't use another one at the moment. The last video, the 24-105, if I use that lens in this situation right now, I would have to take my 1600 ISO and basically make it 2 to 4 times higher, which is not bad, but I'd rather have as low of an ISO as I can, especially when trying to get a very good quality video. So let's start by taking a look at some photos. Now, not that many here. I shot a couple just today. Some were from previous, but let's start by taking a look at the very first photo that I took with this lens. Right here. This first one. ISO 100, 35 millimeter, because this is a prime lens. f1.8, 1/80th shutter speed. Now, unfortunately, this was part of an Earth Day video I had earlier, which was, no matter where you are, essentially there's trash everywhere. So it's unfortunate to see this empty oil can, this piece of rebar or piece of metal somewhere, an empty soda can. I think it's soda. It's unfortunate to see that, but let's take a look at this as a whole. 2-to-1 here. Getting in close. This is something I do really enjoy with the EOS R, is actually not having the joystick. I enjoy using the touchscreen because I feel like it's a little bit smoother moving your focus point. So I was essentially able to set the focus point right here, right in between all of those little blades of grass. So I kind of set it right there. And you can see how shallow the depth of field is here. Because basically from just below the cap of the bottle to the shoulder, I guess you could say, of the bottle, it's that's all that's in focus. That's only a couple inches. And then it starts getting out of focus there. Just ahead of the bottle and the water here, that's out of focus. And that is something that I do enjoy with this. So this camera doesn't have the little joystick. This one, the touchscreen, which I'm looking at the side there, holding this right up to my eye to take some photos. I use the top corner of the touchscreen to slide my focus point around. That is really handy to have. And that's exactly what I did in this situation. So this was an interesting shot, and from the last video, we were looking at something called chromatic aberration. In here, I really don't see any chromatic aberration from anything that was in focus, even though it's not fully in focus because that's beyond the depth of field. It's interesting to see the little balls of water that are sitting on the blade of grass. But overall, this was my first shot. I wasn't too disappointed in this. This was a very nice composition from what I was looking at, trying to send a message about Earth Day. Now, f1.8, which is what this aperture wide open is also good for astrophotography. So this next one, let me go this, put that in fit. This is very recently, this is still in the November sky, Orion. So this is the constellation of Orion. Those three right there, those three stars, that's Orion's belt. And then essentially you have one hand there, a leg there, and a leg there. So that is Orion. This is ISO 100, 35 millimeter because it's a prime lens. It's just fixed right there. f1.8, so wide open. And a 10-second shutter speed. Now this was a really cool photo, and I was able to push this quite a bit too. So let me go back into develop and do a comparison here. So here, there's the original. It almost looks like it was black and white, and there really wasn't a lot of stars. There was also some spotlights on around me, so they were reflecting a little bit into the tree, and it was a very grayish looking sky. But then, I changed the mode. I want that. But then looking here, I was able to get those, I like this kind of bluish sky versus the true black. I can get true black on here and the blackness of the stars will pop out. The tree will disappear. I enjoyed seeing this little blue of the sky. So this was a great photo. The next one here, this was going into a little bit of food photography. Now with this, I actually tried to set it up so I have one photo edited and one unedited that I'm going to edit with you guys. So this first one that we're looking at right now is unedited. The second one is edited. So we'll see what we can do from the raw photo to a finished product. Just in a quick span right there. So let's take a look. So here, the first thing I usually do with photo editing, adjust the exposure just a tad bit, not too much, maybe a third-ish of a stop, around 0.3 of a stop higher. It's not that much of a miss with the exposure. Then let's go into some of these blacks. This is where I can really make this pop, because I want this to be really black. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to make that really look black around there. Not too much down, because I don't want the cake to really have a lot of black in it. So I'm going to set that there, so this line right there on the cake is just a little bit black. Just like that. That's really dark area. Next I'm going to set the whites. I'm going to show that till something white pops up just a little bit. To right about there. So we have the white of the plate. That makes quite a bit of a difference already, just by adjusting these three things. Exposure, I'm going to drop that a little bit. But really the two big ones were the blacks and the whites. So now, let me actually bring this exposure back down to 0. That doesn't look terrible right now. We're still going to adjust some shadows and highlights on there. But that looks decent. So now, let's do that. Let's bring up the shadows a little bit. Let's bring down the highlights. See there? Highlight recovery, it kind of is doing. So let me go back to 0 and bring those down just a little bit. That brings that out. A little bit more detail in there. You see I kind of set my focus point right about there. Let me see about the shadows a little more. Bring up the shadows. Let me see if I can adjust the black just a tiny bit. There we go. Now let's try adding some contrast. Just a tad bit. You don't want to overdo any of this. Okay. Now I'm going to grab the saturation. Just a tad right there. Little bit of vibrance. That makes me hungry again for this piece of cake. Let's see what this would look like lower. Now the other thing I may want to try, this is color. I want to see some monochrome. Very interesting looking shot there. For that I might still drop the highlights down a little more. Interesting there. I don't want to bring the shadows up too much because then you see more of the background, which I don't want visible. Let's bring those blacks down a little bit. Very interesting looking shot that we were able to pull out. So this is where the really fun part of editing comes from. I'm able to try different things, see how different things look, and able to really pull out really great effects or edits from this photo. That's what's also great with this shooting raw or JPEG or just raw, because that's the raw sensor data that's being saved into the photo. And this is essentially an undeveloped piece of film, and we're developing it right now, which is why this is called the develop module. So this is a very interesting looking shot that we made in black and white. Some portraits. So you may recognize this person. This is Meg. She's been on the channel. Last video she was in is when we did the live pumpkin carving on the green screen. I'm still planning on with her getting the Gamer Girl Builds First PC Part 2, which we're waiting on. But this is an edited photo. I did a quick edit just before this. But let me show you what it was before and after. So there's before and there's after. So this is what I was seeing essentially through the viewfinder. A little bit dark on the right side of her face, going through the right side of her hair there. And that was really the only thing that caught my eye a little bit too much. But then this, with the quick edit there, brought out the shadows a little bit more. So usually you don't shoot portraits with a macro lens. And this is what I really like with this RF 35mm. It's a macro lens. The minimum focusing distance, I believe, is like 6 or 8 inches. So you can get really close to objects. And when you get really close to objects with this very shallow f1.8, then you get nice blown out background there. Nice shallow depth of field. Would f1.4 have been a little bit better? Probably. But f1.8 is not that big of a difference. That's why I returned my Sigma 24mm f1.4 that I used the adapter with for this 35mm, which is f1.8. So it's less than a stop difference, but it still is really good. And I like it's nice and compact. Okay, so this was the portrait shot I tried with Meg. Normally, I wouldn't shoot portraits with that macro lens, especially at a 35mm. I really wouldn't try that, but I wanted to here. Now, the next photo that is a portrait photo, is kind of like a macro portrait photo. Right up here, close to her eye. Now, this is where I really enjoy seeing this, the detail of the skin tones in there. And when we get close, we're seeing her eye, the cornea in there. And me, look at this. I think actually, when it tried to do the eye autofocus, it got the eye, but then it went beyond that and it started focusing on me as I was taking the photo. So when we get closer in here, this is the RF35. So it looks like I'm really close to her eye, but I'm not too close. But you can see very clearly, like the background, there's my monitor where I do Games and Storms live from. This is how clear this was able to get, this RF35. It is pretty good, and it is the least expensive of the RF lineup at $499. It's on sale right now for $449 as of this recording. But the detail inside of her eye there, the reflection of me taking the photo, it was really cool to be able to see that. And it's a very interesting type of shot. I don't know if I would do anything with this, but it's very cool to see this, especially how shallow the depth of field was between her eyeball and her eyebrow. You could see it was kind of on a slant there with what is in focus. So that is maybe about an inch of what is considered the depth of field. Very interesting to look at. This one. This is the very interesting one. First, I want to apply the edits. And inside here, let me just see if I drop the highlights a tad bit there. Maybe a little bit of the white as well. So right in here, these are two parts of the outer wax layer, almost like pillars. I was able to get the focus point right on the wick. So let me get even more in close. I'm at 3-to-1 right now. And even though it's very small, you know, candles are not that big, I have the wick where I could see each of the individual threads of the wick. I'll go to 2-to-1. So I could see the individual threads of the wick, but then the outer part of the candle, the outer wax, because there's multiple wax layers in a candle. The outer wax is out of focus. The wick is in focus. So a very interesting shot that I was able to capture there. This was all just about timing and luck. So I set the focus point right to his eye, or her eye. I don't know if it's a female or a male. So actually, let me see if I can get white balance there. That kind of matches. I'm going to do here, set white or black level. A little bit like that. Whites. Just at the top there. Shadows bring up. The highlights bring down a little bit. Oh, I forgot the chromatic profile correction. There we go. Bring those highlights down a little bit more. A little bit more of contrast. And some saturation. Vibrance. Not that bad. And then when we get in close here, I actually noticed I didn't hit the eye. I hit kind of these little furry whiskers in front. But with this, I'm not seeing any chromatic aberration, which is good. Good quality. All right, so that is going to end it right there. All right. Another one in our action review series. I really hope you enjoyed it, though. They were long, but I was able to get really in-depth with editing and analyzing these photos. The last part, you always want to try print out the photos, because what's on the screen is not always what's going to be on the printout, which is my example from the last video with this. It looks so much more smooth and nice looking when it's printed out. All right, well, thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed my review of the Canon RF 35mm f1.8. Then we have one more in the action review series for this Canon EOS R with the lenses I've had for the past year. That is the Tamron 70-200. So don't forget to hit that little subscribe button below and the bell icon right next to that so you get notified when I upload a video like this or I go live. This is meteorologist Andrew Pinero. Again, thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next video.